I'm Sarah, 28, and I thought the worst part of being excluded from my sister's wedding was the humiliation. I was wrong. While I was sipping my tais in Maui, watching my family's Instagram stories of Emma's perfect ceremony, federal agents were storming the reception with arrest warrants. My parents had spent 20 years building their real estate empire on laundered cartel money, and my sister's new husband, he wasn't just a banker. He was an undercover FBI agent who'd been investigating them for 3 years. The family that chose blood over me was about to discover that sometimes blood runs thicker than water, but handcuffs run deeper than both. Before we dive into this wild story of family betrayal and unexpected justice, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments, and if you're ready for a tale that'll make you question everything about family loyalty, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how karma served my family a dish colder than wedding cake left out in the rain. Growing up in the Richardson household meant living in a world where appearances mattered more than authenticity. My parents, Michael and Patricia Richardson, ran Richardson Luxury Properties, the most successful real estate agency in our upscale Phoenix suburb. To everyone outside our family, we were the American dream: incarnate, beautiful home, successful business, two daughters who seemed destined for greatness. But inside our perfectly manicured walls, favoritism ran deeper than the swimming pool in our backyard. Emma, my younger sister by 3 years, could do no wrong. She was the golden child, the one who inherited Mom's striking blonde hair and Dad's natural charisma. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one, the brunette who got good grades and followed rules while Emma partied her way through college on our parents' dime. The favoritism became glaringly obvious during family dinners. Emma would regale everyone with stories of her sorority adventures, her latest shopping sprees, or her revolving door of boyfriends, and my parents hung on every word like she was reciting Shakespeare. When I tried to share news about my nursing career, my volunteer work at the Children's Hospital, or my plans to pursue a master's degree, the conversation would somehow circle back to Emma within minutes. "Sarah's always been so serious," Mom would say with a dismissive wave. "Emma knows how to enjoy life." Dad would nod approvingly. "Emma's got that spark, that Richardson magic. She's going places." I told myself it didn't matter. I built my own life, my own identity separate from theirs. I worked double shifts at Phoenix General, saved every penny, and bought my own modest condo without asking for a cent from them. Meanwhile, Emma lived in the luxury apartment they purchased for her, drove the BMW they leased, and worked part-time at their real estate office, doing what I generously called administrative tasks. The real estate business seemed to boom overnight when I was in college. Suddenly, our family went from comfortable to wealthy. New cars appeared in the driveway monthly. Mom's jewelry collection expanded exponentially. Dad started wearing suits that cost more than most people's rent. They bought a vacation home in Aspen and another in the Hamptons. "We're just good at what we do," Dad would brag at neighborhood barbecues. Location, 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 and knowing the right people. I never questioned it deeply. I was too busy building my own career, too focused on proving that I didn't need their money or approval. But looking back, there were signs that something wasn't quite right. The hushed phone calls that stopped when I entered rooms. The clients who paid in cash for million-dollar properties. The way certain business associates would visit our house at odd hours, men who didn't look like typical real estate investors. Emma never seemed to notice or care about these peculiarities. She was too busy being pampered, too comfortable in her role as the favored daughter. She'd graduate college with a communications degree she'd barely earned, and immediately step into a position at Richardson Luxury Properties, with a title that sounded important, but seemed to involve mostly taking long lunches, posting on the company's social media. Meanwhile, I was pulling 12-hour shifts in the ICU, holding the hands of dying patients, and making a real difference in the world. But that didn't matter to my parents. Emma was their princess, their investment, their legacy. I was just the responsible daughter who'd always be fine on her own. The distance between us grew wider each year. Family gatherings became exercises in polite tolerance. I'd show up for Christmas and birthdays, smile through the obvious gift disparities Emma would receive, designer handbags and jewelry while I got practical items like coffee makers and gift cards, and leave feeling more like a distant relative than a daughter. I started declining some invitations, creating my own traditions. I spent Thanksgivings volunteering at soup kitchens. I traveled during my vacation time exploring places I'd always wanted to see. I built friendships with my colleagues, people who valued me for who I was, not for how well I fit into some predetermined mold. But despite my efforts to create distance, I couldn't completely sever the emotional ties. They were still my family, and some naive part of me always hoped things would change. Maybe when Emma matured, she'd see how unfairly I'd been treated. Maybe my parents would realize they'd been taking me for granted. Maybe we could rebuild our relationships on more equal ground. That hope kept me tethered to a family that saw me as an obligation rather than a blessing. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was just getting home from a particularly brutal shift in the ICU when my phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen, which was unusual. We typically communicated through brief text exchanges about family logistics. Sarah, Emma's voice bubbled with excitement. I have the most amazing news. You have to be the first to know. I kicked off my shoes and settled onto my couch, genuinely curious. Despite our complicated relationship, I didn't wish Emma any ill will. "What's going on? I'm engaged," she squealed. Daniel proposed last weekend during our trip to Sedona. It was absolutely magical. He had the whole thing planned out with rose petals and champagne and a private helicopter ride to watch the sunset. The ring is incredible, Sarah. 3 carats emerald cut, absolutely flawless. I felt a complex mix of emotions: happiness for her, a twinge of jealousy about the extravagant proposal, and curiosity about this Daniel she'd been dating for about 6 months. "That's wonderful, Emma. I'm happy for you. Tell me about him." "Daniel Morrison, he's a banking executive, incredibly successful. Mom and Dad absolutely adore him. He's everything I've ever wanted in a husband: handsome, wealthy, sophisticated. We're thinking a fall wedding, something elegant and upscale." We chatted for another 20 minutes about her engagement ring, the proposal story she'd undoubtedly tell 100 times, and her initial wedding dreams. It was one of the longer conversations we'd had in years, and despite everything, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe this new chapter in her life might bring us closer together. That hope was crushed exactly 2 weeks later. I was grabbing coffee between shifts when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Family dinner Sunday. Important wedding planning discussion? 6 p.m. sharp." I rearranged my schedule to attend, assuming I'd be included in whatever planning was happening. Emma was my only sister, after all. Despite our differences, I wanted to be part of her special day. Sunday dinner at the Richardson house was always a production. Mom had prepared Emma's favorite meal, filet mignon with truffle sauce, roasted asparagus, and chocolate soufflé for dessert. Dad had opened a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Emma sat at the table, glowing with happiness, her engagement ring catching the light from the chandelier. "So," Dad said, raising his wineglass to Emma and Daniel, "and to planning the wedding of the century." We toasted, and I waited for them to start discussing details I could help with. Maybe I could assist with decorations or help coordinate family schedules or even plan a bachelorette party. "We've booked the Phoenician Resort for October 15th, Mom announced. The entire Rose Garden Pavilion with reception in the desert ballroom. 500 guests. My eyes widened. 500 guests was massive, even for a family with my parents' social connections. Emma clapped her hands together. "And Daniel's family is flying in from all over the country. His father knows senators and business moguls. It's going to be absolutely incredible. The guest list is already finalized," Dad continued, pulling out a leather portfolio. "We've been working with the resort's event coordinator for weeks. Catering is handled, flowers are ordered, band is booked." I waited for someone to ask for my input, to mention my role in the wedding party, to include me somehow in the conversation. Instead, they continued discussing details as if I were merely an observer. "What about the bridal party?" I finally asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Emma's face shifted slightly, a flicker of discomfort crossing her features. Well, that's actually what we wanted to talk about. Mom leaned forward, her expression serious. Sarah, honey, Emma has made some difficult decisions about the wedding party, and we support her completely. My stomach began to sink. Emma couldn't meet my eyes as she spoke. I've chosen my sorority sisters as my bridesmaids. We've been planning this since college. It's always been our dream to be in each other's weddings. And Daniel has 5 groomsmen, so the numbers work out perfectly. Okay, I said, slowly feeling hurt but trying to understand. What about a reading or maybe helping with? The thing is, Dad interrupted this wedding is about Emma and Daniel's social circle. Their future business connections. It's not really appropriate for everyone to be involved. The word appropriate hit me like a physical blow. What does that mean exactly? Mom sighed, as if I were being deliberately difficult. Sarah, you work in a hospital. Your friends are nurses and, well, it's just a different world. Emma's wedding is going to be covered in society magazines. There will be photographers from Phoenix Lifestyle. This is about image, about Emma's future. Emma finally looked at me, her expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. It's nothing personal, Sarah. It's just that my bridesmaids have known each other forever and they understand this world. They know how to act at these kinds of events. The implication was clear. I didn't belong in their world. I wasn't sophisticated enough, wealthy enough, connected enough to be part of Emma's perfect wedding. So, what exactly are you saying? I asked, my voice barely steady. Dad leaned back in his chair, as if the matter were already settled. We think it would be best if you weren't at the wedding, Sarah. It's nothing against you personally, but this is Emma's day and everything needs to be perfect. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked around the table at my family, my parents who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally, and my sister who was supposed to be my closest female relative. They were all looking at me with expressions that ranged from mild discomfort to outright dismissal. You're excluding me from my sister's wedding, I said, needing to hear it stated plainly. We're prioritizing Emma's happiness, Mom replied firmly. This is her special day, and she deserves to have everything exactly as she envisions it. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady. I see. Emma reached toward me half-heartedly. Sarah, don't be dramatic. It's just one day. We can celebrate together later, just family. But I was already moving toward the door, my mind reeling. Just family, except I apparently wasn't family enough to witness my sister's most important milestone. Enjoy your perfect wedding, I said, quietly grabbing my purse. I hope it's everything you dreamed it would be. I walked out of that house knowing I would never be back. They had made their choice and it wasn't me. After 28 years of being the overlooked daughter, the responsible one who could always be counted on to understand and forgive, I was done. I spent that night crying angry tears and then started planning my escape. If they wanted to exclude me from the family celebration, fine. I'd celebrate my freedom instead. The decision to book a trip to Hawaii came at 3 in the morning, fueled by hurt, anger, and a bottle of wine I'd opened after leaving my parents' house. I sat on my couch laptop, balanced on my knees, scrolling through vacation packages, while tears of frustration dried on my cheeks. If my family wanted to have their perfect society wedding without me, I'd show them exactly how little I needed their approval. I found a gorgeous resort in Maui, the Grand Wailea, with oceanfront rooms and infinity pools that seemed to melt into the Pacific horizon. It was expensive, more than I'd normally spend on a vacation, but I had savings. Years of living modestly while my family threw money around had left me with a healthy bank account and zero debt. For once, I was going to treat myself the way they'd always treated Emma. The booking confirmation felt like a small victory. October 10th through October 18th, I'd be sipping cocktails on a beach while they posed for society photographers. The timing was perfect. I'd return just after their wedding weekend, tanned and refreshed, and completely unbothered by whatever family drama I'd missed. I took a screenshot of my hotel reservation and in a moment of petty satisfaction sent it to the family group chat with a simple message. Since I'm not invited to celebrate family milestones, I'll be celebrating life in paradise. Instead, Have a wonderful wedding. My phone immediately started buzzing with calls from Mom, but I turned it off and went to bed feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The next few months passed in a blur of wedding preparation drama that I watched from the sidelines like a reality TV show. Emma's social media became a constant stream of dress fittings, venue tours, and bridesmaids' lunches that I wasn't part of. Mom posted photos of flower arrangements and cake tastings, always careful to tag everyone except me. Dad shared updates about the guest list growing from 500 to nearly 700 people. I couldn't help but notice how elaborate everything was becoming. The flower budget alone seemed to exceed what most people spent on their entire weddings. Emma's dress was a custom creation by some designer whose name was supposed to impress people. The bachelor and bachelorette parties were destination weekends, his to Las Vegas, hers to Miami. Meanwhile, I threw myself into work and my own life with renewed energy. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital, started taking Spanish classes in the evenings, and began training for a half marathon. I made new friends through my running group and accepted invitations to social events I might have declined before. Slowly, I began building a life that didn't revolve around seeking my family's approval. My colleagues at Phoenix General became my chosen family during this time. They knew about the wedding situation I'd confided in my closest friend Jessica, who was a fellow ICU nurse. Jessica was furious on my behalf and made it her mission to ensure I had plenty of distractions. "Your family is insane," she said one day during our lunch break. "Who excludes their own daughter from a wedding, and over what exactly? Because you have a real job instead of playing pretend at mommy and daddy's business." Jessica had a point that I'd been trying not to examine too closely. Emma's job at Richardson Luxury Properties seemed to involve a lot of social media posting and very little actual work. She'd post Instagram stories of herself in designer outfits at business lunches that looked more like shopping trips. Meanwhile, I was literally saving lives, working nights and weekends, making a genuine difference in the world. But Emma was the one getting the fairy tale wedding and family celebration. As October approached, my excitement about Hawaii grew while my family's wedding posts became increasingly extravagant. Emma shared photos of her bridesmaid luncheon, 12 perfectly dressed women sipping champagne at some upscale resort. The engagement party photos showed a guest list that read like a who's who of Phoenix society. Every detail screamed excess and exclusivity. I found myself curious about Daniel, Emma's fiancé. In all the wedding preparation posts, he seemed oddly absent. Emma posted constantly about the wedding plans, but there were surprisingly few photos of them together as a couple. His profile showed he worked for some federal agency, but I didn't recognize him and almost deleted the request. Something made me pause, though maybe it was the timing or maybe it was intuition, and I accepted it instead. Marcus immediately sent me a private message. "Hi, Sarah. I know this might seem strange, but I'm a friend of Daniel Morrison's. I've heard a lot about Emma's family, and I was hoping we could chat sometime. I'll be in the Phoenix area next week." The photographer asked us not to have any non-wedding party family in the photos, so it's really better that you're not there. "Have fun in Hawaii." I screenshot that message and showed it to Jessica, who practically exploded with indignation. "They're treating you like you're some embarrassing relative they need to hide," she said. "Like you're going to ruin their precious magazine spread by existing as their daughter." That night, I finalized all my Hawaii plans. I'd booked snorkeling trips, a helicopter tour, and dinner reservations at restaurants I'd been dreaming about. I bought new swimsuits, sundresses, and sandals. I was going to have the vacation of my lifetime while they had their perfect society wedding. But here's where the story takes its first unexpected turn, though I wouldn't understand the significance until much later. The night before I left for Hawaii, I received a friend request on Facebook from someone named Marcus Chen. The engagement party photos showed a guest list that read like a who's who of Phoenix society. Every detail screamed excess and exclusivity. I found myself curious about Daniel, Emma's fiancé. In all the wedding preparation posts, he seemed oddly absent. Emma posted constantly about the wedding plans, but there were surprisingly few photos of them together as a couple. I stared at the message, confused. Why would Daniel's friend want to talk to me, especially when I wasn't even invited to the wedding? I was about to ignore it when another message appeared. It's about your parents' business. There are some things you should know. A chill ran down my spine. I typed back quickly, what kind of things, but Marcus had gone offline and I didn't receive another response. When he did appear in pictures, he looked handsome enough, tall, dark-haired, with an easy smile, but there was something about his eyes that seemed almost watchful, calculating. I dismissed the thought as my own bias. I was probably looking for flaws because I was hurt about being excluded. The week before the wedding, Mom sent me a text that felt like a final insult. Emma's wedding is going to be featured in Phoenix Lifestyle magazine. Sometimes the best family gatherings are the ones you have with yourself. Number self-care, number Hawaii, number living my best life. I tagged the location as Maui and added a countdown sticker 24 hours until takeoff. It was petty, and I knew it. But after months of watching my family flaunt their wedding preparations while excluding me, a little pettiness felt justified. As my plane taxied down the runway the next morning, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: sadness about missing my sister's wedding, anger about how I'd been treated, excitement about my Hawaiian adventure, and a nagging curiosity about that mysterious message from Marcus Chen. What I didn't know as I flew across the Pacific was that back in Phoenix, federal agents were making final preparations for an operation that had been 3 years in the making. Hawaii exceeded every expectation I'd had. The moment I stepped off the plane in Maui, the warm tropical air enveloped me like a hug I'd been needing for months. The Grand Wailea was everything the photos promised. Sprawling pools, pristine beaches, and a level of luxury that made me understand why people saved for years to experience places like this. I threw myself into vacation mode with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been emotionally starved for months. Sometimes the best family gatherings are the ones you have with yourself. Number self-care, number Hawaii, number living my best life. I tagged the location as Maui and added a countdown sticker 24 hours until takeoff. It was petty, and I knew it. But after months of watching my family flaunt their wedding preparations while excluding me, a little pettiness felt justified. I spent my first day lounging by the infinity pool, reading a novel I'd been meaning to finish for ages, and ordering ridiculously expensive but absolutely delicious tropical cocktails. The tais were incredible, perfectly balanced rum and fruit flavors that tasted like liquid sunshine. By day 2, I joined a snorkeling excursion to Molokini Crater. Swimming among tropical fish in crystal clear water felt like being in an aquarium, except I was the one behind the glass looking into a magical underwater world. The tour guide, a local Hawaiian named Kai, was charming and funny, and I found myself laughing more than I had in months. "You seem like you're celebrating something," Kai observed as we dried off on the boat afterward. "Good news or just vacation vibes, Freedom?" I replied, surprising myself with how readily the answer came. "I'm celebrating freedom from family drama." Kai nodded knowingly. Ohana can be complicated. Sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. His words resonated with me as I spent the next few days exploring the island. I hiked through bamboo forests, watched sunrise from Haleakala Crater, and ate fresh poke that ruined me for any mainland version forever. The scale of everything seemed to grow larger with each post, and I found myself both grateful to be away from the circus and oddly fascinated by the spectacle. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday, October 15th. I deliberately planned activities to keep myself busy: a helicopter tour of the island in the morning, a spa treatment in the afternoon, and dinner at Mama's Fish House, supposedly the best restaurant on Maui. I spent my first day lounging by the infinity pool, reading a novel I'd been meaning to finish for ages, and ordering ridiculously expensive but absolutely delicious tropical cocktails. The tais were incredible, perfectly balanced rum and fruit flavors that tasted like liquid sunshine. By day 2, I joined a snorkeling excursion to Molokini Crater. I was determined to have the most amazing day possible while my family had their magazine perfect celebration. Saturday morning dawned absolutely gorgeous. with sunshine and gentle trade winds that made even breathing feel luxurious. The helicopter tour was incredible. We flew over volcanic craters, cascading waterfalls, and coastlines so beautiful they didn't seem real. Every experience felt more vibrant, more meaningful because I was choosing it for myself rather than trying to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be. But even in paradise, I couldn't completely escape the wedding drama. My family's social media posts followed me across the Pacific like digital ghosts. Emma's final dress, fitting the rehearsal dinner at some exclusive country club photos of out-of-town guests arriving in Phoenix. I imagined Emma in her custom designer dress walking down the aisle of the Rose Garden Pavilion while 700 guests watched. I pictured my parents beaming with pride as their golden daughter married her successful banker. For the first time since booking this trip, I felt a pang of genuine sadness. Despite everything that had happened, Emma was still my sister. I'd missed seeing her get married, and no amount of Hawaiian paradise could completely erase the loss of that moment. But I pushed those feelings aside and focused on getting ready for dinner. I'd brought one really nice dress specifically for this evening, a flowing blue sundress that complemented my vacation tan and made me feel beautiful. If my family was having their fancy celebration, I was going to have my own elegant evening. Mama's Fish House was everything I'd hoped: oceanfront dining with incredible fresh seafood and views that belonged in travel magazines. My first thought was panic. Had someone been hurt? Was there a family emergency? I grabbed my phone and saw dozens of messages from numbers I didn't recognize, plus several from people I worked with at the hospital. Jessica had sent 15 texts in a row. Even my old college roommate, who I barely talked to anymore, had sent multiple messages. The most recent text from Jessica simply said, "Sarah, call me right now. You are not going to believe what happened." I imagined Emma in her custom designer dress walking down the aisle of the Rose Garden Pavilion while 700 guests watched. I pictured my parents beaming with pride as their golden daughter married her successful banker. For the first time since booking this trip, I felt a pang of genuine sadness. Despite everything that had happened, Emma was still my sister. I'd missed seeing her get married, and no amount of Hawaiian paradise could completely erase the loss of that moment. My hands were shaking as I stepped away from my table and called her back. "Oh my God, Sarah, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for hours." Jessica's voice was breathless with excitement and disbelief. "I'm at dinner in Hawaii, remember? My phone's been on silent. What's going on? Is everyone okay?" "Okay, Sarah, your family is the top trending story on every Phoenix News website right now. The FBI raided Emma's wedding. They arrested your parents and half the guest list." I felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. "What are you talking about? It's everywhere. Phoenix, New Times, ABC, 15, even some national outlets are picking it up." Federal agents stormed the reception with arrest warrants. "Your parents are being charged with money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy." Something about cartel money and fake real estate transactions going back like 20 years. I sank into a nearby chair, my elegant dinner forgotten. "That's impossible. My parents sell houses to rich people. They're not criminals. Sarah, honey, the FBI doesn't raid society weddings unless they have serious evidence. Apparently, this has been a massive investigation. And get this, Emma's husband, Daniel, he's not actually a banker." "What do you mean he's not a banker?" Jessica's voice dropped to an almost whisper, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was saying. "He's an undercover FBI agent. He's been investigating your family for 3 years. The whole relationship, the engagement, the wedding, it was all part of an operation to gather evidence and catch your parents in the act." The phone nearly slipped from my hands. "You're telling me Emma married an FBI agent who was undercover, not just married Sarah? This is the really crazy part. The arrest happened right after they said their vows. Like literally during the reception. Emma cut the cake, they did their first dance, and then federal agents surrounded the venue. Daniel apparently revealed who he really was right there in front of everyone." I stared out at the peaceful Hawaiian sunset, trying to process what I was hearing. My family's perfect wedding had turned into a federal crime scene. My parents, who'd built their empire on what I'd assumed was legitimate business success, were apparently money launderers for drug cartels, and my sister had unknowingly married the federal agent investigating them. "What about Emma?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "From what I've read online, she's not being charged with anything yet. Apparently, the FBI believes she didn't know about the business or the investigation." But Sarah, can you imagine finding out your new husband is an undercover agent at your own wedding reception? I thought about Emma, who'd spent months planning every detail of her perfect day. The society photographers, the magazine coverage, the 700 guests, all witnesses to what must have been the most humiliating moment of her life. Are there videos, photos? Oh, honey, it's everywhere. Someone live streamed part of it on Instagram before the FBI shut everything down. The images of your parents being led away in handcuffs are already viral. Emma collapsing when Daniel revealed who he was. The guests running for the exits. It's like something out of a movie. I ended the call with Jessica and immediately started searching online. Sure enough, the story was everywhere. Phoenix real estate empire, crumbles at society, wedding FBI, sting, operation ends in wedding day, arrests, undercover agent marries target's daughter in elaborate investigation. The photos were devastating. My parents, still in their formal wedding attire, being escorted away by federal agents. Emma, in her beautiful wedding dress, sitting on the ground looking completely destroyed. Daniel, whose real name was apparently Agent David Morrison, speaking to other law enforcement officials while still wearing his tuxedo. One article included a quote from the FBI press conference. "This operation, conducted over 3 years, involved deep undercover work to infiltrate an organization that had been laundering millions of dollars in cartel money through fraudulent real estate transactions." The wedding provided the perfect opportunity to apprehend multiple suspects in one location. Another article mentioned that Richardson Luxury Properties had been selling homes to shell companies that didn't actually exist, inflating property values and helping drug money appear legitimate through fake sales and purchases. The operation had apparently been much larger than anyone realized, involving properties across multiple states. As I sat there in paradise reading about my family's spectacular downfall, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Shock, obviously. Sadness for Emma, who was truly an innocent victim in all of this. Vindication that my instincts about something being off with my parents' business had been correct. But underneath it all was something else, a strange sense of justice. The family that had excluded me from their perfect celebration had just watched that celebration turn into a federal crime scene. The parents who'd chosen appearances over authenticity had just been exposed as frauds in front of 700 people and the entire Phoenix media. I thought about Marcus Chen's mysterious Facebook message, and suddenly everything made sense. He must have been part of the FBI operation trying to warn me or gather information about what I knew. Thank God I'd been 3,000 miles away when everything went down. I spent the rest of my Hawaiian vacation glued to my phone, watching my family's scandal unfold across social media and news outlets, like a slow-motion car crash I couldn't look away from. The story had everything journalists loved: wealthy family secrets, undercover romance, wedding day drama, and federal crimes that read like a Netflix series. New details emerged daily. Richardson Luxury Properties hadn't just been laundering cartel money. They'd been operating one of the largest real estate fraud schemes in Arizona history. The FBI had evidence of over 200 fake transactions dating back to when Emma and I were children. Properties that supposedly sold for millions had never actually changed hands. Buyers who didn't exist had purchased homes with money that came from drug trafficking operations across the Southwest. The most staggering revelation was the scope of the deception. My parents hadn't just gotten lucky with a few big sales, they'd built their entire empire on criminal activity. The vacation homes, the luxury cars, Emma's college tuition, even the food we'd eaten at family dinners had been paid for with dirty money. I found myself obsessively reading every article, trying to understand how I'd missed the signs. Looking back, red flags were everywhere. The cash transactions that seemed normal in real estate, but were actually suspicious in their frequency. The clients who never seemed to actually move into their purchased homes. The way my parents always had plenty of money but were vague about specific deals when asked. But the most fascinating aspect of the story was Daniel, or David, as his real name turned out to be. FBI Special Agent David Morrison, 32, had been working undercover for 3 years. He'd created an entirely fictional identity as a banking executive, complete with fake employment history, manufactured social connections, and carefully crafted personality traits designed to appeal to Emma. One investigative piece I found included quotes from former colleagues describing David as one of the Bureau's most talented undercover operatives. "He can become anyone he needs to be," said a former supervisor who spoke anonymously. For 3 years, he lived as Daniel Morrison so completely that even his target's daughter fell in love with the character he created. The ethical implications were staggering. David had dated Emma for 8 months, proposed to her, planned a wedding with her, and married her, all while gathering evidence to arrest her parents. The psychological manipulation involved was almost incomprehensible. Emma had fallen in love with a person who didn't actually exist. From my poolside lounge chair in Maui, I found myself feeling genuinely sorry for my sister, for the first time in years. Whatever favoritism and exclusion I'd experienced paled in comparison to discovering your husband was an undercover federal agent at your own wedding reception. The humiliation, the betrayal, the complete destruction of reality as she understood it, I couldn't imagine surviving something like that. The legal proceedings were moving quickly. My parents had been denied bail due to flight risk and the severity of the charges. Their assets, including our family home, the vacation properties, and all business accounts, had been frozen pending investigation. Emma was staying with her former roommate, having lost both her apartment and her job, when Richardson Luxury Properties was shuttered by federal authorities. I learned through news reports that the FBI had been planning to execute arrests regardless of the wedding. The ceremony just provided convenient timing to apprehend multiple suspects simultaneously. Many of the wedding guests had apparently been either customers in the money laundering scheme or business associates under investigation. The guest list read like a federal wanted poster. Social media was brutal. Phoenix society was reeling from the scandal, and everyone who'd ever posed for photos with my parents or attended their charity events was now distancing themselves as quickly as possible. The wedding photos that were supposed to appear in Phoenix Lifestyle magazine had instead become evidence in a federal investigation. But perhaps the most devastating detail was Emma's reaction when David revealed his true identity. According to witness accounts, she'd collapsed completely, not just physically, but emotionally. One guest, who spoke anonymously to a local reporter, said Emma had screamed, "You're lying," over and over, until paramedics were called to sedate her. She kept asking him to please stop joking, the witness said. She couldn't accept that her entire relationship had been an investigation. It was heartbreaking to watch. Meanwhile, I was processing my own complex emotions while floating in an infinity pool overlooking the Pacific Ocean. There was vindication, yes, the family that had excluded me for not being sophisticated enough had just been revealed as criminals. There was satisfaction that their obsession with appearances and social status had ultimately led to their downfall. But there was also genuine grief. Despite everything that had happened between us, these were still my parents. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike and the woman who'd stayed up with me when I had nightmares were now facing decades in federal prison. Emma, who'd been spoiled and favored but had never asked to be born into a criminal enterprise, was dealing with trauma that would probably require years of therapy to process. I thought about calling Emma but decided against it. What could I possibly say? "Sorry, your fairy tale wedding turned out to be a federal sting operation." Our relationship had been strained even before this catastrophe. I didn't think she'd want comfort from the sister who'd been excluded from the disaster. Instead, I extended my stay in Hawaii by 3 days. I wasn't ready to return to Phoenix and deal with the media attention, the questions from colleagues, or the complex emotions I'd need to sort through. The resort was happy to accommodate the extension, especially when I explained that I was avoiding a family situation back home. Those extra days gave me time to think about my future relationship with my family or lack thereof. My parents would likely be in federal prison for years, possibly decades. Emma would need to rebuild her entire life from scratch, starting with processing the psychological trauma of learning that her marriage had been an elaborate lie designed to destroy her family. I realized that the exclusion from the wedding, which had felt like the ultimate rejection just a week ago, had actually been an unexpected gift. I'd been spared witnessing my family's destruction firsthand. I'd avoided being photographed at what became a crime scene. I'd been 3,000 miles away when federal agents arrested my parents and revealed that everything I'd believed about our family was a lie. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely free from the complicated dynamics that had defined my relationship with my parents and sister. There would be no more family dinners where I felt inadequate, no more holidays where I was treated as an afterthought, no more wondering why I wasn't good enough for their approval. The family that had rejected me had ceased to exist in any meaningful way. Returning to Phoenix felt like entering a parallel universe where everything looked the same, but meant something completely different. The city skyline was unchanged, but I now knew that some of those gleaming buildings had been purchased with drug money. The upscale neighborhoods where I'd grown up looked as manicured as ever, but I understood now that some of those perfect lawns were owned by shell companies that existed only on paper. The media attention was even more intense than I'd expected. Phoenix New Times had published a detailed timeline of the FBI operation, and my family's story had been picked up nationally. CNN, Fox News, and several true crime podcasts were covering what they called the wedding sting of the decade. The combination of undercover romance, society scandal, and federal crime had captured public imagination in a way that surprised everyone involved. My coworkers at Phoenix General were fascinated and sympathetic in equal measure. The hospital's break room had become an unofficial headquarters for following the story's developments. Jessica had saved every newspaper article and magazine cover featuring my family's downfall. "I still can't believe you missed all of this by being in Hawaii," she said during our first shift back together. "It's like the universe was protecting you from the chaos." She wasn't wrong. While I'd been snorkeling and eating fresh pineapple, my family had been experiencing the most traumatic day of their lives. The timing felt almost cosmic in its perfection, or imperfection, depending on your perspective. The legal proceedings moved forward with surprising speed. Federal prosecutors had been building this case for 3 years, and they had overwhelming evidence. My parents' lawyers advised them to accept plea deals rather than risk even longer sentences at trial. Richardson Luxury Properties was officially dissolved, its remaining assets liquidated to pay restitution to victims of the money laundering scheme. Emma's situation was more complicated and heartbreaking than I'd initially realized. She'd been questioned extensively by federal agents, but wasn't charged with any crimes. The FBI was convinced she'd been genuinely unaware of her parents' criminal activity and David's true identity. However, her marriage was obviously null and void since it had been contracted under false pretenses. The psychological impact on Emma was severe. According to mutual acquaintances, she'd suffered what psychiatrists called a complete break from reality following the wedding day revelations. She'd been briefly hospitalized for psychological evaluation and was now in intensive therapy trying to process the fact that her entire adult life had been built on lies. I felt genuinely sorry for her. Despite our complicated relationship, Emma had been an innocent victim in this situation. She'd fallen in love with someone who didn't exist and married him in front of 700 people, only to discover hours later that he'd been investigating her family for federal crimes. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that I couldn't imagine how anyone recovers from something like that. About 6 weeks after my return from Hawaii, I received an unexpected visitor at the hospital. I was just finishing my shift when the receptionist called to say someone was waiting for me in the lobby, a man named Marcus Chen who said he knew me from social media. I remembered the mysterious Facebook message from before my trip and felt both curious and apprehensive as I headed downstairs. Marcus was exactly what I'd expected from his profile photo, Asian American, probably early 30s, with the kind of alert posture that screamed law enforcement. "Sarah Richardson," he said, standing as I approached. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. I'm Special Agent Marcus Chen, FBI. I believe you received a message from me before your trip to Hawaii." I nodded suddenly, understanding why he'd wanted to talk. "You were part of the investigation. I was Agent Morrison's handler during the undercover operation," he confirmed. "We've been following your family's activities for several years, and your name came up frequently in our research. I wanted to meet with you to explain a few things, and also to ask if you have any questions about what happened." We found a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria, and Marcus began explaining things I'd never known about my own family. The money laundering operation had started small when I was in middle school, but had grown exponentially over the years. My parents had been connected to 3 different cartel organizations and had helped launder over $50 million through fake real estate transactions. "The sophistication of their operation was actually quite impressive," Marcus said. "They created entire fictional buyer profiles complete with employment history, bank records, and social media presence. Properties would sell for millions of dollars to people who didn't exist, allowing dirty money to be transformed into apparently legitimate real estate profits. What struck me most was learning how my exclusion from family business discussions had actually protected me. The FBI had investigated every family member thoroughly, but my complete separation from Richardson Luxury Properties and my legitimate career in healthcare had kept me out of the criminal enterprise entirely. Your parents were very careful about compartmentalizing," Marcus explained. "Emma was involved peripherally through her job at the company, but even she wasn't given access to the actual financial details. You, however, were kept completely separate. In some ways, your parents' favoritism toward Emma actually shielded you from criminal liability." I asked about David Morrison and the psychological toll of his 3-year undercover assignment. Marcus's expression grew serious as he discussed the ethical complexities of the operation. "David is one of our best agents, but this assignment was incredibly difficult for him," Marcus said. "Maintaining a fake identity for 3 years, developing genuine feelings for a target's family member, planning a wedding while preparing for arrests, it took a significant psychological toll. He's currently on administrative leave, receiving counseling." Did he really care about Emma, or was it all just acting? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "That's complicated. David has said that while his initial approach to Emma was purely professional, he did develop genuine feelings for her over time. But those feelings existed for Daniel Morrison, the character he created, not for his real self. The person Emma fell in love with was essentially a fiction. The complexity of the situation was staggering. David had been playing a role so completely that even he'd become confused about where Daniel ended and David began. Emma had fallen in love with a carefully constructed persona designed to facilitate her family's destruction. The emotional manipulation involved was almost incomprehensible. "What happens to Emma now?" I asked. "She's receiving counseling and support from victim services," Marcus replied. "The Bureau recognizes that she was harmed by our operation, even though she wasn't a target. She'll likely struggle with trust issues and reality perception for years to come." As our conversation concluded, Marcus handed me his business card and made an unexpected offer. "If you're interested, the Bureau could use someone with your medical background for future operations. Healthcare workers have access to communities and information that can be valuable in financial crime investigations." I thanked him, but declined immediately. I'd spent my entire adult life building a career based on helping people on healing rather than investigating. The last thing I wanted was to become involved in the kind of elaborate deceptions that had just destroyed my family. But his offer made me realize something important. I was completely free now to make my own choices about my future. My parents couldn't disapprove of my decisions from federal prison. Emma was too traumatized to judge anyone else's life choices. The family dynamics that had constrained me for 28 years had been permanently shattered. Over the following months, I watched the legal proceedings conclude from a distance. My parents each received 12-year sentences after accepting plea deals. Their assets were liquidated, and the family home where I'd grown up was sold at auction. Emma gradually recovered enough to give interviews to federal prosecutors confirming her lack of knowledge about the criminal enterprise. The media attention gradually faded, replaced by newer scandals and more recent crimes. But the impact on Phoenix's social scene was permanent. The Richardson family name became synonymous with deception and federal investigation. Former friends and business associates distanced themselves completely, and the charity events and society gatherings where my parents had once been stars continued without any mention of their former prominence. Emma and I never reconnected. She moved to California to start over somewhere no one knew her story, and I respected her need for distance from anything connected to her trauma. Sometimes I wondered if we might have become friends if we'd met under different circumstances without the baggage of favoritism and exclusion that had defined our relationship. But mostly I felt grateful. Grateful that I'd been excluded from the wedding that became a crime scene. Grateful that my legitimate career had kept me separate from my family's criminal enterprise. Grateful that I'd been sipping my tais in paradise while federal agents destroyed the facade my family had spent 20 years building. The exclusion that had felt like the ultimate rejection had actually been an unexpected protection. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Looking back now, 18 months later, I can see how that painful wedding exclusion was actually the universe's way of setting me free. My family chose blood over me, but it turned out their blood was tainted with crimes I never could have imagined. They valued appearances over authenticity, and their obsession with image ultimately led to their destruction being broadcast across national media. I've built a life now that's entirely my own, free from their judgment, their expectations, and their criminal legacy. I volunteer with organizations that help families affected by federal investigations, sharing my experience and offering support to people navigating similar trauma. My work at the hospital remains fulfilling, and I've been promoted to charge nurse in our ICU. Most importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts about people and situations. The family that excluded me for not being sophisticated enough was running a $50 million money laundering operation. The sister who got the fairy tale wedding married an undercover FBI agent who'd been investigating our parents for 3 years. Sometimes, the people who seem to have everything perfect are actually living the most dangerous lies. Have you ever experienced family karma this dramatic? Have you watched people who wronged you face consequences you never could have imagined? Drop a comment below and share your story. I read every single one and love hearing how justice finds its way back to people who deserve it. If this story of family betrayal and unexpected justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that prove truth really is stranger than fiction. My parents would likely be in federal prison for years, possibly decades. Emma would need to rebuild her entire life from scratch, starting with processing the psychological trauma of learning that her marriage had been an elaborate lie designed to destroy her family. I realized that the exclusion from the wedding, which had felt like the ultimate rejection just a week ago, had actually been an unexpected gift. I'd been spared witnessing my family's destruction firsthand. Sometimes the family that rejects you is doing you the biggest favor of your life, and sometimes the wedding you miss turns out to be the chaos you were blessed to avoid. Here's to building your own life, trusting your instincts, and letting karma handle the people who underestimate your worth. Until next time, keep believing that justice finds its way to those who deserve it, sometimes in the most unexpected and dramatic ways possible.